All right, good afternoon, everyone. Today is Tuesday, September 10th, 2024. I believe we are live. This is the Airport Advisory Board September meeting. I think the first item is a roll call, and hopefully, Penny, can you help us through with the roll call, please?
Yeah, she's hopping on right now. She's just doing an update. I'll pull up the list for everybody for the roll call. It's Commissioner Lance,
Present.
Carla Reynolds, Joe Soborowski, Alana White,
Present.
Kara Beer, Nate Darlington, Vester Davis, Kelly Scott,
Present.
T.R. Shaw,
Here.
Amy Marciano Ratliff.
Present.
All right, and that seems to be it. So it seems like we do have a quorum.
Great. Thank you. All right. So everyone has an opportunity to review the agenda. Can I entertain a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion.
Support. This is
Moved and-
Alana.
Thanks. So moved and supported. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Item number C, approving the previous meeting minutes.
Motion to approve. You'll make the motion. Oh.
Second.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Update from the airport staff. Your show, guys.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. So I will share my screen again here. Okay. So today's update is going to be relatively short. I'll go through what we have planned after this, but I do have a couple updates for the board. So thank you everybody for joining us again. Like I said, there isn't as much in this one as I've had in previous ones, but we do have some development that we have happening here at the airport that we're excited to share. We also have an update with a current tenant, and then we can go around the room. But I really wanted today's meeting to focus on the ALP update. So I will give my updates. I'll let Penny and TR speak their piece on the centennial that's coming up in a couple weeks. And then we'll kind of move it over to the consultants for the ALP update. So just a piece of a news for everybody. On August 13th, the City Commission did approve expansion plans for its DMOR Group. That's the parent company of Waco, Waco Kitchen Centennial, and in this case, the Junkers company. So their plans call for a 45,000 square foot pre-production facility to help facilitate the company's growth in that aircraft line. They're calling that the Junkers line. So it's a different aircraft than what they're currently producing. So they really just add to the lineup of aircraft that they currently manufacture. Construction of the new facility is scheduled to begin next month. So we've been working with them and some of their planning folks and some of their engineers and helping them out to meet their goals. They're anticipating hopefully finishing the project by the end of 25. So what you'll see, if you're familiar with that space right there, if you've ever been over to Waco, that area, their parking lot right there, a lot of that development is going to be happening in that parking lot or kind of in their current space. They got approved for some additional parcels in front of their building. So you'll see some construction going on over there, but we're very excited. Again, to me, it shows a robust and healthy development here at the airport. We're seeing multiple current tenants expand. We know we just talked about earlier this year the Duncan facility opening. We were very excited to see that. Now we're going to have another facility opening or starting construction, then hopefully opening by the end of next year. So we're very excited here at the airport. We're obviously looking forward to supporting the project and seeing how it moves forward. We're still in the very, very initial stages, so we've gotten some approvals on our end. There'll still be some other paperwork that they're currently going through, some environmental work, things of that nature. But we're very excited to see Waco expanding here and the DeMoor family of companies that they have here at the airport expand. So are there any questions on that particular expansion? No? All right, great. And I just wanted to update some folks on one of our current tenants is the FAA. They operate out of a hangar really right next to Duncan and the FAA control tower. So they've been here at the airport since 1992. They operate a fleet of King Airs, so some multi-engined aircraft that go around and test land-based navigation equipment all over the region. So from North and South Dakota all the way over to Eastern and Southern Ohio, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio. So this Great Lakes region is supported by just the aircraft located at this airport. So it's an extremely essential piece of help to the national airspace. They certify and work on, again, all of the land-based equipment that aircraft use or are guided in to larger aircraft or larger airports or even smaller airports like ours that have that equipment. So we've been in talks with them since the springtime to see if they'd be interested in a longer term lease. They've been here at the airport since 1992, like I said, but over the past 12 years or so, they've just been on a year-to-year lease. And so we were interested in seeing if they would like to do anything longer term. Fortunately for us, they said yes, they were. So we've kind of tentatively agreed on a 5-year lease extension for the FAA, so that we shouldn't really see anything change here. We're still working through some of the details. We'd like to have that finalized by October 1st. Just going back and forth with some of the lease language here. We're hoping to, again, not only have a tenant who's really been a cornerstone at the airport for 32 years, but also, like I said, just have a diverse tenant base. So it's really nice to see airports really like to see more than one operator. Just like with any city or with any business, you'd like to diversify as much as possible. So having the FAA here not only shows that they like what we're doing here at the airport, that they trust us, but that they see us as kind of an essential operating base for the region. So they looked at other airports. None of the other airports really had what we have to offer in terms of the size of the hangar, the size of the office space that's attached, the ramp that's in front of it, or the infrastructure that we have here at the airport. So I'm hoping to have another update for you and kind of finalize that for the next Airport Advisory Board meeting. But we're very excited that the FAA chose Battle Creek and chose to stay here and didn't go anywhere else or don't plan on downsizing and removing that operation. So I can take any comments or questions that any of you have on that update. All right, great. And that really wraps up my piece. I'm sorry if anyone has any stress if they see snowy pictures or pictures of snow in September, but I like the picture of Battle Creek, so I added it on to the end. But if there's any other questions on pieces either I didn't touch on or any updates you'd like, feel free to, you can ask me now or send me something later. But that's the updates I have for now, and then I can pass it along to Penny and TR for the Centennial. But are there any questions or comments from the group for me? All right, great. I will send it over to Penny. I think she's on with us. If not, we
Sorry.
can,
No,
oh, there's
mute's,
Penny. Go ahead, Penny.
mute's on, or now it's off. TR can go ahead and start with the centennial bit.
Good. Yeah, we're all set, Saturday, September 21st, the big day. We've got a lot of stuff planned. We're gonna be starting about 8 o'clock at Western, which has graciously offered to host all of this. The students there are doing a pancake breakfast. We're also having a fly-in. We've got some military aircraft coming in, some private aircraft, and these pretty unique displays. And Western is gonna be open for tours around, that for the rest of the morning. And then 11, we begin, we're going to have a rededication ceremony, and we have Dr. Russ Calvahuna is going to speak. He's the former Western Flight Ops Director, and he is also former board chair of the Aeronautics Board for Michigan, and he's presently the president of Henry Ford College in Dearborn. And after that, it'll be a full morning, exciting morning. We're getting the word out about it right now, trying to get some things in the media and get the word out. So if any of you can help spread the word, please do. Beyond that, we'd hope to have a large green historical plaque. We'll have a mock-up of that there at the event. That's still coming in the future. There are some snags with getting that there, and we're still working on the book. Hopefully the next year we'll have a book published about the history of the airports. There's a few things going on beyond this. So it'll be a great event. Just help us get the word out and get the word around your circles. It'll be a fun morning, fun day. And we'll hope to recognize 100 years of aviation in Battle Creek. Anything else, Penny, you want to add? Or Phil?
Sorry, mute off. We are putting out those press releases, I believe, sometime this week, and working with Eric's team in the city communications manager's office there to get all of the good stuff out with all the details.
Good. Hopefully we'll have some good media presence there for it. Be a good day, and I'm working on the weather. The weather will be great, so it'll be a good time. So thanks for all your help, for everybody that's been involved with it. It's been a long, arduous journey, but we'll be seeing it through on the 21st.
Thanks, TR. All right, can we move to the presentation?
Yes, hello, this is Zachary Puches with Mead and Hunt. Hopefully you can hear me as well. Stephanie is on the line and going to use this opportunity for, call it a mic check here as I share my screen. And if Stephanie, if you can hear us, maybe you could try dialing back in. I can lead us, Steph, until you are able to join us. And I think I did this screen share correctly. Hopefully everybody is looking at that.
Yeah, we can see it, Zach.
Excellent, Phil. And so the purpose of this presentation is just to go over some preliminary alternatives on ideas of what the airport could look like based on information that we've collected through the inventory process here. There we go. So there's really 3 steps here that we'd like to focus on. The first one is just a quick review of some of the design and federal funding eligibility criteria that drives some of the improvements or ideas for improvements, I should call them, through this airport layout plan process. Present some, I'm calling preliminary alternatives, some ideas based on these design and federal funding eligibility criteria, and then collect some feedback from all of you, and then review next steps as we move on with the airport layout plan process. And I'll pause her after every slide, Steph, whenever she can hear us. She's texting me that she can hear us, just for some reason it's working through the mic process. So I'll continue us here to keep us on schedule. So for the design and federal funding eligibility criteria, there's really 3 focus areas that's going to drive decision-making on future infrastructure needs. The first one is critical aircraft. The second one is looking at evaluation of local wind conditions. And then the third one is the airfield capacity. I'll go through those 3 very briefly here, or Steph will when she joins on. But want to make a couple important points there at the bottom of this slide. The first one is that back in the day when it came to the FAA funding projects at an airport, it was a different mindset. How about that, to be, say, nice and polite? So what the FAA is looking at now is really a focused look on how they use their dollars and making sure that projects they fund meet eligibility criteria. So 3 important considerations is the first one, that even though you have infrastructure today and it's designed a certain way, if you go through this federal funding design criteria, especially on the critical aircraft, if there's a change, just because you have it today doesn't mean you get to keep it. It's a short way of saying that. So that's an item that airports are working through when they're looking at future improvements. The second one is that airports, with right cause, want to design infrastructure for future users. Unfortunately, when it comes to federal funding eligibility, the FAA is looking at the critical aircraft and what's going on at the airport today. And we'll get into those a little bit more detail coming up. And the third item that's important is that if there is a need to make a change because of a change of a critical aircraft, as I like to joke, doesn't mean you have to take the bulldozers off the flatbed trucks tomorrow and make the change. The change would occur at the next time there's any kind of improvement needed for that piece of infrastructure, with the caveat that at that time you do that improvement, that you would go through and reevaluate your critical aircraft, your wind, your capacity, et cetera, to confirm what that looks like at that point in time. Pause if there's any questions. I don't hear Steph, so I will keep moving on. All right, so the first one is critical aircraft. So for the FAA to fund a infrastructure improvement project, the critical aircraft must conduct at least 500 annual operations. And your critical aircraft can either be an individual type of aircraft, or it can be what we call a family grouping of aircraft types based on their approach speeds and your wingspans. Without getting into all of the details of it, the critical aircraft for the current critical aircraft for Battle Creek is a C2, which is basically your larger size business jets, which makes sense. There's a lot of that activity happening at the airport. There's over 500 operations of them, right? So that's our critical aircraft. However, when we look at future infrastructure needs, when we reviewed data that was pulled to make this determination, that we found that there was over 268 operations in 2023 alone of types that were larger than this family grouping of C2. And some examples are those larger former airline aircraft that are converted into cargo for moving auto parts, for example. So there are these larger aircraft operations occurring at the airport that we do need to account for and take into consideration when designing or planning for the future design of the airport. The second item associated with critical aircraft, or let me move the next slide here. Hold on just a second. I've got a whole bunch of screens here open at the same time. Okay, let's go back. Sorry about that. The second item associated with critical aircraft is related to that wind evaluation. So for the wind evaluation, it's looking at historical direction and velocities of winds over a 10-year period. When we looked at that, good news, the orientation of the primary runway, 5 left, 2, 3 right, the FAA recommends that it provides at least 95% wind coverage. If it does not, a crosswind runway is justified. Good news, the primary runway does not provide 95% wind coverage, and crosswind runway 1331 is considered in the FAA's eyes eligible for federal funding. So that's good news in retaining that piece of infrastructure. The critical aircraft associated with that wind evaluation is a family grouping. It's called B2, but it's basically your larger turboprop types. And those are the types that are most frequently using the runway today. So it's a long way of saying that the primary runway and the crosswind runway, the FAA sees those as being, I'll call them eligible pieces of infrastructure for funding. What they will fund is a whole nother story, but that's the purpose of our meeting today. The third item to look at as far as the design of the airfield goes is the airfield capacity. So that's the amount of traffic that the airfield can process with its orientation. So there's two parallel runways and a crosswind runway at Battle Creek. When we look at the eligibility of that, the FAA has some guidance that says if there's based on your fleet mix of aircraft types, if you reach a certain, I'll call it a threshold of operations, then you're eligible for a crosswind runway. So when we looked at that data, looking at current operations and then projecting out to the future, we were showing annual operations at the airport being around 115, 120, 125,000-ish, without having that number in front of me. For a airport to justify a parallel runway, the number of operations needs to be around 200,000, 230,000 operations. Obviously, we are well under that number with what's happening at the airport today and what's being projected out in the future. So from an airfield capacity standpoint, the parallel runway, 5 right, 2-3 left, it'd be unlikely that the FAA would see that as a eligible piece of infrastructure. And I'm going to move on to the next slide and pause for just a moment if there's any questions before going through a quick summary of these findings.
I have a question.
Yes.
So when you talk about the potential for a crosswind runway, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. So Battle Creek does not necessarily have enough operations for it, or it could have enough operations. I want to make sure I heard that.
Yes, great question. So for the crosswind runway, there's two components. There's the direction of the local wind and the operations. And currently, both of those criteria are met. The direction of the local winds justify, or let me try this again. The primary runway, if it's not able to accommodate or be aligned in the direction of local winds at least 95% of the time, then eligibility, federal funding eligibility of a crosswind runway is, I'll say, approved or justified. So that criteria is being met. The primary runway, and I don't have the number in front of me, I think it was around like 93, 94%. So the crosswind runway is eligible from a wind direction standpoint, and it also has the 500 operations that's occurring on it.
Got it. And so my next question is, if I understand correctly, and I apologize, it's been a long time since I've done airport planning, but I do know a little bit. There's usually a series of studies that happen around the crosswind runway, which includes, everything from what's in the RPZ, the runway protection zone, to how it might be developed. And so if I also understand the process correctly, the next step would be not just ensuring the ALP has it, but doing a more formal master plan or an environmental impact assessment. Is that correct?
That type of effort would be needed at the time that some type of improvement action would be proposed for the runway. So it's not necessarily needed right now, but I'm going to make up a scenario. Let's say the condition of the pavement needed to be improved. It would be at that point in time that there'd be some back and forth with the FAA on exactly that planning effort that would be needed.
Got it. Thank you.
You are welcome. Any other questions? If not, moving forward here to this slide that you currently see. So in summary, from a federal funding eligibility standpoint, the primary runway, the design of it, this family grouping of C2 types, which is business jet aircraft types, is what the FAA is going to view as the critical aircraft type. Our, I'll call it consideration, is that for C2 design standards, a 100-foot wide runway width is justified, and the current width of it is 150 feet. So again, it doesn't mean we have to go out there today with bulldozers and make it narrower. It just means at the time there would be a major improvement project, such as a major pavement improvement project. There would be some back and forth on the FAA to determine what they would pay for, and likely they would only pay for a 100-foot wide runway width. Looking from the length side of it, I'm intentionally not going into great detail on the length, because It's important that the airport keep its 10,000-foot runway length for many obvious reasons with all the different types of users. If we were to go to the FAA today and say we have a major pavement project and what are you willing to contribute? Based on the types of business jets operating there, they would probably say around 7,000 feet of runway length is eligible for federal funding. However, for moving forward in planning the future of the airport, we're going to continue the plan for a 10,000-foot runway. And again, when that point in time comes, there'd be conversations with the FAA to make that determination. With 1331, like I said, critical aircraft is a B2. It's justified by the ability of the primary runway to meet the local wind conditions. So that is good news from a federal funding eligibility standpoint. The one note on that is for a B2 runway, a 75-foot runway width is justified, and the current width is 100 feet. So again, if there were to be a pavement improvement project on the runway, there'd be some coordination with the FAA. The good thing, though, is that the 5,000-foot length of 1331 would be justified by the types of users on it. Our team did do some preliminary calculations of takeoff distances of the types of aircraft that use that runway, and 5,000 feet was about the average. So that's a good news from that standpoint. For 5 right, 2, 3 left, the parallel runway, that runway, as I mentioned, based on the capacity numbers, would not be considered eligible in the FAA's eyes if we were to go there today and ask for any type of funding for the project. So that's a consideration that we need to take into account in planning the future of the airport into whether there's a desire to continue to maintain and have that piece of infrastructure, or if that area could be used for other purposes, which we'll look at here in just a moment. Any questions on this? All right. So before I show some preliminary alternatives, there's really 5 infrastructure areas that we're looking at as a part of this airport layout plan update. The first one is the runways, and we kind of talked about it already. Are they justified? Are they eligible? Would the FAA be willing to participate funding if there was an improvement project on that runway? Same thing goes with the taxiways as well. And there's a few design considerations that we're looking at. I'll show you here in a graphic or two. And not only just the width of the taxiways, but also just their geometry. Think of it when you're driving your car down the road. When you come to an intersection, it's desirable to have that intersection be at 90-degree angles so it's easy to look left and right to see if there's traffic to cross the road. That's the same mentality for the design of an airfield as well. The FAA would like to see intersections at 90-degree angles so that when pilots come to them, they have a clear or as clear view of vision as possible to make sure that that surface is cleared before they cross it. And then the other item from taxiways that we're looking at is direct apron access. So the FAA would like pilots to be forced into making a turn when exiting an apron instead of, if they were to accidentally do it, just keep taxiing a straight line and accidentally enter a runway without authorization. In addition to that is the development items at the airport, so areas for additional hangars. Do we have areas for aeronautical and non-aeronautical development? And then even areas that are on airport property but not contiguous with the airfield, such as areas for solar panel installations. There's no questions on that. Now we finally get into some of the fun items. So on the screen is what the airfield looks like today. And the reason for showing this graphic, you'll see those black lines on there. Those are different airfield design elements that need to be taken into consideration when planning for the future of the airport. Those black lines represent areas that need to be clear in some instances of objects, such as buildings, roadways, etc. It's easy if you look at an aerial of the airport and just simply look at where the pavement is. One who's not aware of these design surfaces might imagine that a building could be built a lot closer to a runway than it may appear. So the purpose of this graphic is just a point of reference for what it looks like today, in that in looking at some of these preliminary ideas on what the airfield could look like, taking in consideration these boundaries, I'll call them, of these different design surfaces. I'll leave that here. Any questions about the design surfaces? Mhm. Okay, so the first major infrastructure element in looking at potential opportunities is future runway 1331, the crosswind runway. So what's illustrated here in kind of that bluish green color is a 75-foot wide by 5,000-foot long pavement width that the FAA would likely consider eligible if there were a need to do an improvement project on that runway. So we're showing that for planning purposes. Doesn't mean that's exactly what it has to look like, but just for planning purposes. And you'll notice a lot of those pink parallel taxiways to the runway. And we wanted to show that because that's being carried forward from the existing airport layout plan sheet on the future plan. And at the time when that was drawn, there were discussions about if there were opportunities on the north side of the main runway, 5 left, 2, 3 right, that if there were to be aeronautical needs on that side of the runway where there's a need to taxi aircraft, where could a potential taxiway go? And then likewise on runway 1331, you'll see that there's 2 parallel pink taxiways on either side of that. And again, that's just being shown as being carried forward on the existing airport layout plan. The purposes of illustrating those is to is mainly for consideration of whether those surfaces are needed or not. The last time the airport layout plan was updated, there was a thought of there being a need for aeronautical development on the north side of the airfield that required taxiways. And so that was shown on there. Like I said, the intent of this is not showing that we're going to continue to carrying it forward, but just showing what it looks like. And again, as an opportunity, as you think about what the future airport could look like, just provide or preserving space, I should say, for that potential development. The other one you'll notice here on the, I'll call it plan view north, but it's really more, call it eastish, I guess, of 1331, is you'll see that there's some red hatched out areas for taxiways. And the reason for that is one is just aligning the spacing of the parallel taxiway with the primary runway to meet the B2 requirements. Right now, the spacing exceeds or is more than what is needed is a better way of saying it with the parallel taxiway. So just bringing that in more to align with design standards for a B2 runway. And then also to, I'll call eliminate some of those non-90-degree section taxiways. You'll see 1 or 2 there just to the, I'll call it plan view north of 1331 and to the right, the 5 left, 2, 3 right in this orientation you're looking at right now, where you see some of those kind of Y-type intersections. So the idea with the showing that with that pink colored future potential taxiways is to kind of square off those intersections so they intersect at a 90-degree angle. I'll pause there for any questions. I know there's a lot of line work on here and it's a little bit, it could be confusing or disorienting, I'll jokingly say to some, but the point being of it is for our team is to really look at, is there a need to have 2 parallel taxiways on either side of these 2 runways based on the types of users that we're planning for at the future at the airport. All right. All right, the next major infrastructure item is the parallel runway, 5 right, 2, 3 left. Like I said, if we were to go to the FAA today and if there was an improvement need for it and ask the FAA for money, they would look at the operations that are occurring at the airport, and it'd be ineligible for federal funding. So there's 2 alternatives to show what this side of the airport could look like. One of them, as you're seeing right now, is continuing to maintain that runway. So you'll notice to the, I keep calling it plan view north, but again, I think it's more towards the west, a 5 right, 2, 3 left, of there being opportunities for development to expand over by the Duncan Aviation and the Watco areas, to put in some box style and T style hangars and grow that area as much as that space allows over there. You'll see kind of a future relocation of that airport road, which is being carried forward from some previous ideas to allow a Duncan or a Watco to expand if they needed to in the future. And then likewise, to the bottom of the graphic, you'll see that there's a preservation of space for future aeronautical related development, whether it's some T-style hangars or box-style hangars off of Helmer Road there should there be a need for that. The important thing about that area is you'll notice at the end of the runways, there's kind of a trapezoidal shape area. That's called a runway protection zone. And in theory, that should be clear of objects and land uses and people. It's a space kind of preserved since that's the arrival and departure path of aircraft. You'll notice existing today that Helmer Road goes through there. We have some a small areas of residential uses in there. So while it's not desired, it doesn't mean it's you have to shut the airport down by any means. But in planning future development, those areas are kind of off limit on what we could do in those areas. And there's a reason why I point that out, because going on to the next slide, if the parallel runway were to be closed, if a decision were made to not continue to fund it locally, since it's not going to receive federal funding, it does open that area up for development. And while there's limitless layouts that could be done in that area, the idea with this, I'll call it idea, is to keep the land closest to the airfield open for aeronautical purposes. Again, showing some box style and T-style hangars in that area, with some of the land that is, you'll see it to the left here, kind of hatched, being for more non-aeronautical uses. If there was a developer that wanted to construct something on airport land but didn't have a need to access the runways or the taxiways. You'll also notice to the right there that with that runway being closed, that preservation of space for the runway protection zone obviously goes away, because that surface would no longer be a runway. And you'll see it does open up additional area along Helmer Road for potential development adjacent to the western campus. I'll leave that up here for just a moment if there's any questions. All right. So these last two graphics I have, again, these are just initial ideas based on the data that we've collected on what the future of the airport could look like. So in planning for the future, if there were a desire to keep the existing airfield configuration, this is an idea of what it would look like. Obviously, it looks very similar to what's happening today, with the exception of there being continuing to plan for, I should say, additional areas for aeronautical development there, adjacent to the parallel runway towards the bottom of the picture. Also want to point out, if you look towards the left, there's some areas shaded in green, which is airport property located that's not contiguous with the airfield, that would offer opportunities if there was a solar farm developer, for example, that would like to place panels on the airport property, but away from interfering with airfield operations. Those are some opportunities there as well for that. You'll notice to the top, more west of the main runway, 5 left, 2, 3 right, of there being some development areas for either aeronautical or non-aeronautical purposes. Obviously, aeronautical purposes makes the most sense over there. So we've identified it as hangar development, but that area could also be potentially developed if there was a UAS or some type of emerging aviation technology need. Those are opportunities up there on that side of the airfield to put that type of development. And then that's where that, on that previous slide with those pink, those future potential parallel taxiways to the runway, those pink taxiways as they were shaded, there's opportunities there if a decision were made to install one of those on the north side, or just to have the traffic cross the runway based on whatever that use is. And then moving to the next slide here, this is again future a potential idea for the airport if the parallel runway were continued to not be maintained, since it's would not be eligible for federal funding again if we were to go to the FAA today. So it's that same layout you saw on the previous slide, but just more of a higher level detail here of what that airport could look like if there was a decision made not to invest locally to keep that runway operational. I'm going to pause right here and leave the screen up for just a minute for questions, ideas, thoughts.
This is Alana again. I have a quick question, hopefully quick. So if we were to explore the use of unmanned aerial vehicles, my assumption is that the FAA is the one who reconfigures the airspace above the airport. Or is that something that would fall under the ALP as well?
It's a good question, and Phil, if you'd like to jump in and correct my answer, I'll jokingly call it. But as far as the airport layout plan process goes, there are no drawings on the airport. Well, let me try this again. If there was any type of airspace changes, it wouldn't necessarily be reflected on the airport layout plan. While the airport layout plan does have some drawings that show airspace around the airport, I guess I'll call it change in air traffic control procedures, maybe for lack of a better way of saying it, that type of change is not reflected on the airport layout plan.
Hey, Alana, yeah, that's a great question. If there's any changes that would be needed specifically for, UAS or drones or any type of aerial vehicles, there's usually a process with a waiver first that they go through. So the person would need a COA, so they would be allowed to operate in the airspace. And then based on what's allowed or what's restricted in that application, the operator potentially would have, certain abilities to operate either within the airspace of the airport, so the controlled airspace that our air traffic controllers have control of, or even around the airport. So it's kind of on a case-by-case basis when it comes to the operation of any type of UAS. But we work with the air traffic control tower. They get those applications, and then we'd also work with any other larger operators or companies that would need to operate more than just, let's say, one or two at a time. Does that answer your question, Alana?
Yeah, so just to make sure I understood your comments. So we've been talking about doing development on the west side of the airport for a while. And so if we were to have a drone park, for example, then it sounds like based on the first entrance or first two entrance to that drone park, they would work with the FAA along with you, Phil, to ensure the airspace is appropriately configured for operation.
Yeah, so they kind of look at what we currently have in terms of infrastructure. So obviously the air traffic control tower, the type of airspace we have. So there's, different types, larger airports like a Metro or Chicago would have a different airspace configuration than what we would have. And then based on that, they would really identify or tell us what their needs would be. So any other equipment they might have, any other additional frequencies they might need, any other operating restrictions they might ask for or have. And then based on all of those, that's where we kind of work with our current air traffic control tower with the FAA and then see what either again, what is allowed or what is acceptable, and then what would we need to change in order to have that. So I'd say we have everything we have or we would need in place for a larger business or potential tenant to come in here and utilize the space. And then we're currently, especially with BCU as a partner, working on getting any additional infrastructure, any other additional equipment we might need for larger UAS operations.
Got it. Thank you.
Questions? And while I have this graphic on the screen, just want to point out some of the taxiway considerations. So again, you'll see the purple, or the purple, get my color straight here. The pink shaded taxiways are future taxiways. You'll kind of see the red shading there of hatched out. That's that change in the alignment of the taxiway system so that there's more of those 90-degree angles, as I mentioned earlier, to improve pilots' visions when they come up to those intersections. The other item to note is that in front of the Duncan Aviation Hangar, it's a little hard to tell on this level of detail, but an example of a direct from an apron to a runway access is right there in front of Duncan. There's that opportunity if an aircraft were on a Duncan ramp, and if they were not familiar with the airfield, to accidentally taxi onto the main runway. So some kind of change, whether it's a closure of that little connector taxiway, relocation, etc. I mean, we're showing here on this graphic as a preliminary idea as it being closed and some kind of new taxiway be constructing someplace else as a potential option, but doesn't necessarily mean that's it. So Not as big of an issue at this airport as others. There is, like I said, one instance of that. There are a few instances of the 90-degree intersections, but they're items that the FAA will require us to look at as a part of this airport layout plan update and show on the future ALP. And then, like I said, when an opportunity comes where, for example, the condition of that pavement needs to be improved, that's where you would revisit that and have that coordination with the FAA and looking at the design of it and what options are potentially available. There are no other questions before I move on to the last slide. Again, really the three with those eligibility criteria and the existing infrastructure at the airport based on the users. Obviously, the most significant potential change is that parallel runway. With that, like again, if we were to go to the FAA today and ask for money, with that not being federally eligible, is there a decision to continue to plan and keep that runway operational using local funds? Or if that cost is too great or it's not considered to be a logical use of money or feasible, I should also say, then there's an opportunity to reconvert that area for other potential development as needed. So I'll kind of flick back and forth here from what it could look like if it were to be retained, and then what the airfield would look like with that area being used for another purpose. And really the point of presenting this with all of you is just for have you to think about this and share ideas with our team. Reach out to Phil, reach out to us. I'll share our contact information in a minute. And if there's something there you say, that's a great idea, I like that, or hey, wait a minute, I don't like that change, let us know. That's the purpose of presenting this information with all of you. There we go. So I'm talking about it. Next steps. So our final steps are to finalize alternatives based on input that we've received from you. We've met with the tenants. Obviously, we've met with Phil and his team at the airport, and really is collecting that feedback from all the users of the airport on what that future use of the facility looks like and how infrastructure needs to, I'll say, change or be adjusted to accommodate that demand. So this is meeting with all of you is I don't want to say our last step, but an important step in collecting feedback on what this airport looks like. So after this, our next steps is to then present potential options, basically these same types of graphics that you've looked at with MDOT so that they have an understanding of where we're headed, what the future looks like, and to collect their feedback on that as well. Once we have all of that, the last few steps of this is more on the meat and hunt end. It's finalizing that future airport layout plan sheet of what the airport could look like at the future based on all this information that we've collected and gathered and understood. And then obviously presenting that to the FAA for their review and approval. And there's also another item that I'll very briefly touch on here. I don't have any slides on it, but another significant part of this process is to identify tree obstructions around the airport. When you had asked earlier about the airport layout plan showing airspace, this is one of the elements of what we do that something affecting airspace is shown. So there's an effort ongoing to review potential tree obstructions around the airport, identifying those trees and then identifying an action, whether that's some type of easement, removal of the tree, pruning, whatever that seems appropriate for that location is, and then documenting that on the airport layout plan sheet. I didn't include a slide intentionally on that because looking at a bunch of tree data points on slides can be a little overwhelming, but understand that that's also a part of this process. So once all those tree obstructions have been identified, we've collected feedback on the future of the airport, we've met with MDOT. That's the final step in the process, is seeking the MDOT approval on our airport layout plan and then publishing that for use. Any questions on next steps?
I do have one quick question. It's probably for Phil. And I'm wondering, based on where the ALP is, and my assumption is you'll provide an update to the TIFA pretty soon here, whether there are changes in the type of support that you may be thinking about in order to make decisions around improvements and capital projects for the airport.
Yeah, great question, Alana. I think as we get into this and we start having the conversations with the state and the FAA in terms of, again, all the infrastructure that was shown here and the support that we would need for either maintaining the current pavement or adjusting what we currently might have, let's say on a 5-year capital plan, or changing what we currently maintain into either more pavement or less pavement. Yeah, that would definitely be shared with this group, the TIFA board, anybody with supporting interest here at the airport, because it's going to be this ALP update and this master plan update really is going to drive not only upcoming investment from the state and the FAA in terms of grant money, but it's also going to kind of change or focus what we have to invest in as well, in terms of whether it's a match for the grant, future maintenance that might be needed, or future maintenance that maybe isn't going to be needed anymore. So yeah, it definitely is going to dictate or point us in the direction of where we're going to go in terms of capital planning, or in terms of requesting capital funds. And part of that is changing really from maybe equipment or a structural repair to a more larger, again, taxiway repair or removal, or a runway repair or removal, or some kind of rehabilitation or changing of that. So if the infrastructure has to be slotted in at some point, we're definitely going to let you know as soon as we know, or as soon as we get that information. But everything that Mead and Hunt has shown us has been extremely helpful so far. We've already got some preliminary ideas of what that could look like over the next couple years. And fortunately for us, it's not anything that's immediate. It's really kind of in the longer term, over the next really year or two, getting an understanding from, again, the FAA and the state, or MDOT, where they see the airport, or what they will approve at the airport. And then once we get those approvals, then going forward with the requests that we would have. So does that answer it?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Great question.
And Phil, from my end, that is the end of our slides. I have the contact information of myself and Stephanie, and then Tommy Odette was also a key member of our team who helped pull technical data. So there's our contact information. Like I mentioned previously, the idea of showing these is just to kind of have you think. I laugh a little bit. I usually think, well, about 2 o'clock in the morning when I get for a drink of water when I'm sleeping. So when you have those types of ideas, reach out to Phil, reach out to our team. Please share them with us. That's the purpose of us presenting these findings, is just to collect that feedback and input and ideas on how we can improve the airport to meet the demands of the users. Phil, that is all that I have.
Yeah, thank you very much, Zach. Any other last questions for Zach? All right.
Thanks, Zach. Nice job.
Thank you.
And that's really it for the airport updates, Commissioner Lance. And we really just kind of have the discussion of the next meeting, which would be in December. I just put the December 3rd and 10th in there. The other possible date could be, the 17th, but I know that gets us a little closer to the holidays. So I just put 2 on there for the December time period.
Does anyone have a strong preference towards either date?
And I should add, they're both Tuesdays. We can change that if we need to.
Okay. Well, why don't we just set it for December 10th?
All right, perfect. We'll put the 10th on there. Penny will send that out as a calendar hold for everybody. And we will get that on everybody's calendars.
Thank you. Eric, is there any folks in the public comment room?
We currently have no one in the waiting room, Commissioner Lance.
Okay. Do any members have anything they'd like to add before we adjourn? Outstanding. All right, everyone, have a good rest of your September.